It's time to start my great experiment for the year. I'm going to try to grow tomatoes all year long and harvest tomatoes every week of the year. Do you think I can do it? I have no idea. This is a completely new experiment for me. The plan is to grow the tomatoes in this Spider Fermer grow tent using the Spider Fermer light and try and grow them for a full year. Now, I've grown tomatoes outside for many, many years, but it's a short season here. We're in zone 5, 3.5 months, and we're pretty much done for the year. So can I keep them growing all year long? This is the first in a series of videos, and I'm going to update it whenever there's something interesting to tell you. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. And in each subsequent video, I'm going to do a Q&A and answer those questions for you. Now, I've made a product review video of the grow tent and the lighting system, and I'll put links in the description and at the end of the video. I did make a couple mistakes in those videos. The first one was that when I showed you the tent, I had the mat here upside down. The right way to do it is to have the reflective surface at the bottom, which only makes sense. The other mistake I made was a comment about controlling this light with an app. I said that you'd have to buy an extra controller to make that work, and that turns out not to be true. You can control this light the way it is with an app. About 5 or 6 weeks ago, I started some seedlings. I had them under the lights growing with my houseplants, grew them up to a certain size, and then once they were large enough, I planted them into these grow bags. Now, these grow bags are only full about 3/4 of the way. The thinking here is that as the plant grows, I'll fill more soil in, and tomatoes are notorious for making roots along the stem. So I'll increase the root ball as they grow by putting more soil in the pot. Eventually, I'll have the soil up to about 1 inch from the top of the pot, and right now the soil level is a little more than halfway. I grew a couple extra seedlings in case one of them died, and this is the way I grew them. This has been growing in my other lights up until a few minutes ago when I decided to bring it over here. I'm sure you can see the difference. The plants are growing much better here than they are in the other part of my house. I think there are 2 reasons for that. This has a higher light level, and secondly, these plants are starting to run out of room in the pot here. I think the roots are quite crowded now. The plants have been growing quite well, and they're starting to make side branches, so I'm going to have to start pruning them pretty soon. What type of tomatoes am I growing here? Well, I've decided to grow 2 Wheat 100s. That's my all-time favorite for many, many years. I really like the taste. They're easy to grow. But in the last couple years, I've been growing the new GMO cultivar called Purple. And I'll try to put a link to more information about those in the description below. These are also a cherry tomato. They're also indeterminate. And in the last couple years we've been growing them, they're extremely productive and the flavor is really good. In fact, my wife and I have decided that we like Purple better than Sweet 100. So I'm going to try 2 different cultivars and see which one does better in the grow tent. Now, if you've grown indeterminate tomatoes, you're going to know that they get pretty tall. In a 3-month period outside, they can grow up to 8-9 feet. So that's one of my problems here. The grow tent's not really that tall. I have about 4 feet from here to the light. So I'm going to have to come up with some way to grow them all year long. And I'm guessing that in a year, these things will grow to 20 feet, 25 feet. Not really sure, but they're certainly going to grow taller than there's space. So I've come up with an idea that I'm going to try. I'm going to use the lower and lean system, or a modified version of that. That system has a string going from the bottom of the plant to a hook at the top, and then we prune to one stem and we train it up the string. Once the plant gets to the top, we then lower the string and move it over a bit. So the plant then leans and lowers. Then it grows for a while, and then it leans and lowers. So the plan is that this plant will go straight up for a while. And when it gets too high, I'm going to lean it this way, and it'll grow up here. And of course, that one will lean that way and grow up, and around the circle they go. This plant will be growing up here for a while, and when it gets too tall, I'm going to lean it around there, and it'll grow up the back corner for a while, and then it'll lean again and grow up again. And the stem will stay in this pot but it will circulate around the base of the tent, around, and we'll see how many times around it goes before the year is up. In theory, that should work. Now, before we do the leaning, we're going to have to prune off the lower. Let's talk temperature. One of my concerns when I first set this up was that it will get too warm inside this grow tent. Now, normally I have the front down. I've just put it up so that you can see inside easily. Contrary to popular belief, LED lights do produce heat, and that heat will be trapped in the tent. The nice thing about this tent is it has lots of vents. It has round side vents that can be opened. It also has some small vents along the bottom, and I could open the sides and the front as well. And there's a nice vent right in the top. I have all the vents open right now, and I'm finding this isn't really warming up at all. The heat's traveling in the side vents at the bottom, going up and out the chimney vent. It's working really well. In fact, now I'm a little concerned it might be too cool. This is in the basement, and it's going to get quite cool down here in the wintertime. And I'll probably have to close some vents to warm it up a little bit. Remember, tomatoes only pollinate properly at certain temperatures. So it's going to be important that I control the temperature and be within that range so I get good pollination. What about the watering system? Well, so far I've been watering by hand, and I use my standard water mixture. It's about 25% tap water. That gives me calcium and magnesium, 75% rainwater, and then I use a Miracle Grow soluble water fertilizer, the 24-8-16, and I mix that up so that I have 100 ppm of nitrogen. Now, if you're not familiar with ppm, I encourage all gardeners to learn this. We would have much better conversations with each other if we talk in ppms instead of teaspoons. The problem is that most of the discussions online that talk about teaspoons don't give enough information so that you know what they're talking about. If we all switch to ppm, it's so much easier. The problem is, how do you calculate ppm? Well, you go to my website, gardenmist.com, look in the menu, and you'll find a tool to calculate ppm. Anyways, I'm using 100 ppm nitrogen, watering by hand. Now, the plan was that we were going to use the Spider Fermer gravity-fed watering system for at least 2 of these plants. As I was playing with the system, I learned that it doesn't wick up high enough to water seedlings that are planted high in the grow bed. They're only keeping the roots wet near the bottom. And so the suggestion from Spider Fermer is don't use that system until the plants are reasonably well grown and there's a root system at the bottom of the grow bag. So for now, I'm still doing hand watering. But in another week or so, I'm going to take 2 of these pots, 1 of each type of tomato, and convert them over to the automated system. And we'll compare hand watering on 2 of them and the automated system on 2 of them, and we'll see which one works better. By the way, I've made a video about that watering system, and I'll put links to that in the description and at the end of the video. The next thing I'd like to discuss is the lighting system. Now, this uses a Spider Fermer LED grow light system that is quite powerful. Right now, I've got it set to about 50%. I'm running the lights for 14 hours a day, and when I measure the light level down here at the plant, I'm getting about 15,000 lux. That is a ppfd of about 225. Now, that's not bad for growing tomato. It's a little on the low side, but remember, they're going to start growing, and as they grow up, they'll get more and more light. In fact, when I measure this halfway up, I'm getting about 20,000 lux compared to the 15 down here. And if I go to 6 inches below the lights, I'm getting 50,000 lux. Now, all of those measurements were done with the front door closed, so there's more reflection that way. So I have plenty of light with this system. In fact, I did an article recently on gardenmist.com about the best DLI value for growing tomatoes. Now, DLI is the daily light integral. It's the total amount of light that the tomatoes are getting, and it takes into account both the intensity of light as well as the duration of light. The plants right now are getting a DLI of 11.3. The ideal DLI is about 13. So I'm pretty close to the ideal. And as the plants grow, they're going to get a higher DLI. So about halfway up with these settings should be just perfect for growing tomatoes. And so that's how I'm starting the experiment. Now, what are my concerns for this year? Well, I don't know if the lower and lean method is going to work. I'm going to have to come up with a slightly modified version of that. And I don't know what will happen with the stems laying in the bottom of the tray here, but I'm pretty confident that that will work. I also don't know if I can grow the plants all year long. Are they going to grow and continue producing fruit for 12 months of the year? I assume they will. Provided the growing conditions are right, I don't see why they would stop growing. But I haven't been able to find anyone online who's done an experiment like this for that period of time. My third concern, and probably the biggest one, is diseases. It's the 1st of September, and by this time of the year, my outside plants are starting to show signs of diseases. If I get diseases in the grow tent, I'm going to have a hard time to control them. I don't really have any chemicals that I want to or could use to control fungus infection. Now, the continual pruning that we're going to do, that will help, and I'll discuss that more in the next video. How many leaves do you leave? When do you prune? And so on, and there's science to back up that information. But if I get a disease in here, I could be in big trouble. Other than that, I'm pretty confident that the system's going to work. And my goal is to pick some tomatoes every week for the next year. Of course, that year starts when the first ones are ready to pick. I hope you'll follow this. I'll be making several videos throughout the year. And so that they're easier to find, I'll give them the same name and just call them part 1, part 2, etc. I hope you'll follow me on this. Happy indoor gardening.